You know why you're not proud to be a piece of shit? Because you don't want to be a piece of shit. And you have to hide. You have to have this lack of accountability behind what you're doing. It's not really who you want to be. You're not proud of it. You know you want more for yourself. You just don't believe you can have more for yourself. You don't believe that the cards are in it for you to have more for yourself.
I would just be like, well, this guy's, of course, got to be on steroids.
Right.
Like, there's no way. Like, how can you be this big, have this much muscle, you know, be able to lift weights that I can't even dream of picking out of the rack? What do you say to somebody who's like, I can't fathom you being a natural athlete?
I ended up going up to like, I think it was like 240, 250. I got really, really fat. When it comes to making a big change, sometimes you have to stick your neck out there and risk getting your head chopped off if you really, really want to make a change. My whole childhood was absolute chaos. I smoked weed the first time in my life when I was 9 years old. By 14, myself, I had become addicted. Dropped out of school. I was sleeping in the middle of a desert, in a blizzard in the middle of a desert. No fucking idea what's going on. The usual stay out there is about 2 to 3.5 months. I was there for 6 months. All my friends were like, dude, you're insane. You're genetically gifted. I'm just okay with suffering. You're not getting the goals you want. So what's the number one thing we should do first?
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Special guest in the house. Ziad's making his way up from Southern California, but you are pretty much born and raised Bay Area guy, right?
Yeah, in Berkeley, yeah. Born and raised in Berkeley, so.
And we have a tradition of starting the show off with a little banter.
Okay.
So tell me about the most fun thing you did in the last 2 weeks being back in the Bay.
Marcus, I'll be honest. I don't have a lot of fun. I work really hard. No, I'm kidding. Honestly, man, just hanging out with my little brother.
Yeah.
You know, it's, you know, I for a lot of people, I'm somebody who they've gotten comfortable coming to nonstop for like just advice. You know what I mean? Like I become kind of like a Ziad GPT myself. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like, I don't. Even with my close friends, you know what I mean? It's like there's always this narrative of like, they want me to kind of chime in on whatever they're doing or their life or their circumstance or, you know. And so, you know, and I am always in work mode. It's hard for me to disconnect from it. But it's like, you know, when you hang out with a family member, there's just a baseline understanding of each other where it's like, I appreciate who you're becoming. I appreciate who you were, but we also remember who we were when we were just like, there was not a worry in the world. We were just kids hanging out. And I think there's a level of like free spiritedness that comes out with that. So it's like, you know, I laugh a lot, but like, you know, I've hysterically laughed more, you know, hanging out with him and just, you know, driving back together. Just, you know, I've been staying at my dad's and he doesn't have a room for me. You know what I mean? So I've been like sleeping in the same bed as him, like sleeping at the foot of the bed, like a Michael Scott in the Office. You know what I'm saying? So. Honestly,
and he's about, what, 10 years younger than you?
He's 11 years younger than me, so he's 19. So that's like another aspect of it, right? Is like, there's a little bit of a level of immaturity, right? He's 19, you know, he's an adult. He's a very, very, you know, mature guy, but like, there's still a level of
I'm 19.
I'm 19.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you know, like I said, because he's my brother,
right?
I'm comfortable. I'm able to allow myself to kind of fall back into that part of, you know, that innocent part of myself and just like really enjoy that. You know
well,
I mean?
We've spent the last, a good amount of time over the last 2 weeks. I think we've known each other now for maybe 3 or 4 months. We'll get into that background, but just you being here, I absolutely see the work mode, the brain switched on, you being really somebody who has a tremendous amount of wisdom, and you're only 30 years old, correct?
Right. Yeah, I'm 30. Yeah, 31 this year.
So, how does somebody who's 30 have so much wisdom outside of just training? Because you could talk training and fitness forever, but I was drawn to you because I could sense just in a little bit of your social media that there's like a general wisdom about life perspective that's beyond, you know, just sets and reps and knowing how to lift weights, big weights. What's this? Give us a little bit of the story of you and how you got here.
Yeah. So I mean, some full background about me is, my family originated from Lebanon. My mom's side of the family had actually a very successful orchard out in Palestine way back in the day, and they would, they were very, very well off. My grandfather built the University of Lebanon out in he was the contractor that the government hired to build the University of Lebanon. So back in the day, my mom was very well off, like crazy,
Yeah.
Now because of the economy crash, it's nothing, but then my dad was a soldier for his entire life, so my mom moved here when she was 19 because she had gone to the grocery store for 20 minutes. And in that 20-minute time period, her apartment complex got bombed to the ground. And she was like, fuck this. Wow. I'm out. So she had an uncle who actually lived in Marin County. And she came here and moved here and devoted her life to activism and kind of fighting the fight from a safe place, which... full respect to that, and then my dad moved, and then she went back to Lebanon when she was 34, 35, met my dad at a radio show. They got married within like 6 weeks.
At a radio show?
Yeah. It was like he worked she worked at a radio show.
Okay.
He came to do, some conversation about some activist conversation or whatever. Yeah. And so they met 6 weeks later, they were married. She was pregnant with my brother. Fast forward 4.5 years, she's pregnant with me. This is when my dad officially finally moves from Lebanon to the U.S. So I got a father who was fresh off being in the military for his entire life in one of the most war-torn countries in the world. And my mom has severe anxiety and all this stuff. So I was born in Berkeley, California, but I might as well have been born in warfare just because of the amount of PTSD that like existed in my home, and like, one of my first memories in my life was, my dad dragging me. I had this long hair and it was my mom and my dad were fighting and I was trying to stop like the fight, and my dad grabbed me by my hair and like dragged me through the living room and put me in my room. And that's actually when my mom ended up cutting my hair for the first time. I looked like a girl when I was young. She like let my hair grow out, so she ended up cutting it. So I was born into immediate chaos.
Yeah.
I'd been in therapy since I was 3-4 years old. Now keep in mind, therapy back then is like just playing, trying a therapist trying to understand how I react to things. You know what I mean? And I mean, it was bad, man. My whole childhood was absolute chaos. You know what I mean? And like, I grew up in a pretty nice environment. Like my parents worked hard because they wanted to kind of, they wanted to give us a nicer environment. So I was, and so when I was, middle young, like, or I guess, late elementary school, middle school, everything, I lived in Albany right there. And it's a pretty nice town.
Yeah.
But I didn't belong there. And I was aware of that. Like I'd go hang out with my friends, I'd go to their families, I'd go to school, and I'd see how all these kids existed. And I was like, what the fuck is going on in my home? You know what I mean? Like why is it like so abusive and so chaotic in my home? And literally everybody else around me is just like these very supportive, uplifting, beautiful families. You know what I mean? And so it's like I immediately was hyper aware that like my circumstance was different, you know what I mean? And that something was wrong. Of course, when you're a kid, how much you're going to understand, Yeah. My dad used to joke that at 6 years old, if I could have had a mortgage and a family, I would have had it. Like that's how like much I wanted to have control over my thought and how much I wanted to have control over my situation because I just knew something was wrong. And I think I from an early age, I didn't like the fact that like I didn't understand, you know what I mean? Like I felt unsafe not understanding, and unfortunately, man, it just got worse, right? Because I understood that I was lesser than the people around me at a very young age, and I I pretty much felt as if I didn't deserve as much as other people, because hell, if I did, why do I have less, right? If I did, why is my dad never showing up? If I did, why is my mom always projecting her fucking anxieties on me all day long instead of wanting to know who I am? Instead of wanting to understand that maybe I'm not like every other kid, and maybe I shouldn't be treated like every other kid,
Yeah. This is how generational traumas get passed down. Just
right.
This is it.
She wanted me to be scared too. Mm-hmm. She wanted me to hide and run away too, right? Because at the end of the day, I'm not saying my mom made the right choice running to America to get away from that shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, she kept fighting that fight, and it's like, well, yeah, you were fighting it from a very safe place.
Sure.
You know what I mean? You were taking, I'm not saying I want my mom to go get blown up, you know what I mean? But in the end of the day, it's like, you played the strong game from a very safe distance where you couldn't be harmed, And I think she wanted me to be the same way, where she wanted me to care. She wanted me to have empathy. She wanted me to have compassion. But most of all, she just wanted me to be safe. Yeah. And at the end of the day, when it comes to making a big change, sometimes you can't play it safe. You know what I mean? Sometimes you have to stick your neck out there and risk getting your head chopped off if you really, really want to make a change, And so unfortunately, man, there was a lot of addiction around me. Two of my aunties passed away because of drug addiction. My dad, everybody around me, there was a lot of drugs, a lot of coping mechanisms that existed around me. And so unfortunately, at a very, very young age, I smoked weed the first time in my life when I was 9 years old. I ended up being out on the street and been involved with some really bad things by the age of 11, 12 years old, and by 14 myself, I had become addicted to a lot of different substances, and dropped out of school at 14 years old. I got expelled initially and then went to a continuation school, stopped going there, then stopped going to school completely. It was bad. I was headed in a very wrong direction. And I guess you could say God blessed my mom's anxiety, but she ended up sending me to what's called Second Nature out in Utah. So I don't know if you've ever heard of those programs where they have giant Samoan guys come and kidnap you from your bed at 4 in the morning.
Okay. No. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
So
I've heard a lot about them. I've never met anybody that's
I spent 3 years in that system, man.
Wow.
So December or November of 20, I don't remember the dates, but freshman year, they picked me up from my house. They flew me out to the Utah desert. I had never left California at that point.
Oh, wow.
I was sleeping in the middle of a desert, in a blizzard in the middle of a desert. No fucking idea what's going on. And the usual stay out there is about 2 to 4 months, 2 to 3.5 months. I was there for 6 months. Because my mom and my dad my mom wanted to send me to a boarding school, therapeutic boarding school. And my dad was, oh, no, my son will come back and I will fix him. And, and I'm like, motherfucker, you weren't there. If you were maybe there for a crumb of any of my, you know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't be here right now. You know what I mean? So finally, after 6 months, my skin is like black. I've lived in the desert, you know what I mean? For 6 months now, they finally decided I'm going to come home and my dad's going to take care of me. So I come home. Within 2 weeks, he's calling my mom, get this fucking kid, gave up again, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying by any means was I easy to deal with because as I said, I was very high functioning. I understood things very well. I understood the psychological game very early on. And so when I saw weakness in people, especially people who were trying to control me, right, such as my father,
push back.
I'd push back. And I'd push back in an ugly way, right?
Yeah.
Because I understood that his behavior stemmed from a weakness that I could exploit. You know what I mean? And so, went back to my mom's and immediately went back to, and now it was worse because I feel like I'd missed out on 6 months of my life.
Yeah.
And all my friends, unfortunately, they felt an obligation to respect my image. So unfortunately, a lot of my friends started doing some bad things when I left because they thought they were showing respect to me when, and what I represented before I left. And So, there was more opportunity now for me to do even worse things, because now I wasn't the guy who was trailblazing. I was just joining in on the party. You know what I mean? And so within 2 months, my mom had sent me back. And she sent me back to the desert. I was there for about 2.5 months, and then I got sent to a boarding school in Montana. Now, keep in mind, this boarding school was run by Mormon therapists. There wasn't another colored kid in that entire school, and they were extremely racist. Extremely racist. Wow. The amount of racist remarks that therapists would give me in group settings, thinking it's funny, like genuinely thinking like it's a joke that I would appreciate. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not like, I have a very good comedy sense. But when you're kind of being held hostage in the middle of fucking Montana by a bunch of therapists who are like giving you the hardest time in the world because you simply are an Arab guy, you know what I mean? And they are just, you're like probably the first Arab guy they've ever seen in their entire life. Like, then it's not really funny anymore. You know what I mean? Then it starts to... So I was there for 2 years. I was one of the longest stays there. They every time I got in trouble there, they would amplify the consequence. Very bad for me. So, but that being said, the tools and the insight that I developed there, be honest with you, a lot of kids from that school have killed themselves. Or worse now than they ever were, because the way that they go about psychological development there is very abusive. Very abusive. They put you in these group settings where like you cannot progress in the program unless you are like in these group settings. I'm talking about screaming at the top of your lungs, exposing all your deepest, darkest, you know what I mean, secrets about everything. And, they put you in these workshops where they sleep deprive you. So you don't know what day it is. You don't know what day it is. You don't know what time it is. You're just in this box for days. Because as a sleep deprivation technique, right, as we get sleep deprived, we get more vulnerable. We get more exposed. And then they'll put us through these like really intensive exercises where you break down. You're crippled because of the sleep deprivation, and so they kind of exploit that to get you to get raw. Now, as a 14-year-old, fucked up. Super fucked up. Yeah. As an adult, I am endlessly grateful, because what they did teach us there, if you were lucky enough to be able to translate it into your adulthood, it was our essence. They were essentially reminding us what our essence is, right? What is our truth about who we are, our fundamental truth that is going to guide us and keep us balanced and on the right path for the rest of our lives, right? So in the final workshop out there, the biggest part of it was that you had to get up in front of everybody and make a true, deep-rooted, integral statement of what are the values that define us personally. Yeah. And in the end of the day, the two things that I came with was honesty and accountability, right? Accountability and forgiveness. Those are the two things that I had said that define who I am. Because in the end of the day, anybody who knows me knows I'll give people a bajillion chances, including myself. The only reason I am where I am today is because I've forgiven myself for all the horrible mistakes I've made in my life. You know what I mean? And I've understood that regardless of what I've done or what anybody's done to me, I deserve an opportunity to live and be happy and be my best self, as does anybody else. And yeah, somebody might stab me in the back 100 times, but on the off chance that 101st time that I forgive them, they shift and they actually become a better person for the rest of their lives because they finally saw for themselves what they were doing and everything like that. Who cares about all those 100 times? Yeah. Right? They made the shift. I made the shift, And then the accountability aspect, right, is that I never want to be ashamed of who I am. The same way I'm okay with talking about my addiction and my past and everything like that. Like I never wanted to like feel like that person who has to build a face around him to hide my shame. You know what I mean? Like it's always been important to me to just be honest, bruh. Just like be honest about who you are. Be honest about what you're thinking. Be honest about what you want, even if it's horrible. Even if what you do is horrible. Don't have shame behind it. You want to be a piece of shit? Be a piece of shit. Be proud to be a piece of shit. You know what I mean? You know why you're not proud to be a piece of shit? Because you don't want to be a piece of shit. And you have to hide. You have to have this lack of accountability behind what you're doing because it's not really who you want to be. You know what I mean? You're not proud of it. You know you want more for yourself. You just don't believe you can have more for yourself. You don't believe that the cards are in it for you to have more for yourself, you know? After I left that boarding school, dude, I got sent during that time in that boarding school. I got sent back to the wilderness program after getting in trouble. So I had done 3 times in the desert, and then I was in the boarding school.
Man, you in the desert were like this.
Oh, dude, I could left-handed blindfolded. I could start a fire in 6 seconds with a rock, a piece of sage fireboard, and a bow. Blindfolded, left-handed. I'd start a little ember, put it in a nest, blow it, and boom, we had a fire. Like I was a Hey, zombie apocalypse, y'all call Coach Z.
Yeah, you were the Arab Bear Grylls.
Yeah, exactly.
Winning.
But I'll be honest with you, bro. When I left, worse than ever, dude.
Really?
Worse than ever. For years. Got very, very involved in the drug game for a long time. Bad.
Yeah.
Very bad. I was 20 years old, living in a warehouse in Boston, about 4 hours outside of Boston, in a detail shop. It was a detail shop. I was living upstairs. I was severely addicted to drugs. My hair had fallen out on the top, thinned out. I was balding on my beard. I was overweight, very sick, in a very bad position. I mean, this is 4 years after I'd gotten out of boarding school, 3 years after I'd gotten out of boarding school. It was very bad. I'd dropped out of college twice. There's a million stories I could tell you about those 3 years of my life, you know, very bad. And I'd called my mom and I said, you know, can I come home? Like I left home at 17. So, you know, I called her, I said, can I come home? I want to get my life together, you know, came home, wasn't doing much better. And then, I was at my buddy's house. He had gotten into fitness because he was overweight and he had a little bench press at his house, and we're all drinking at his house. And one of my friends started talking shit, saying he could bench press more than me. I had never lifted a weight a day in my life, you know, before then. I didn't care for it or whatever. And ended up benching, I forgot, some ridiculous amount of weight, you know, and my friend was like, dude, you know people go their whole life trying to bench that, like you just did it, like your first time, whatever. And I said, maybe I have something here, you know? So I walked into a 24-hour fitness the next day, walked up to the biggest dude wearing a trainer shirt, and I said, can you teach me about bodybuilding? And a year later, I was breaking some records in powerlifting, and that's how it all started, you know?
That was 21?
Yeah, I was 20 when I walked in the gym. So,
damn.
You know, so to answer your question, man, the wisdom comes from a need to survive, right? It's simply just...
Yeah, people don't get wisdom from the easy road. Wisdom comes from immense challenge and obstacles, and you can hear other people's stories. I can share my own stories of my struggles, and you can try and compare and contrast, like who had it worse, and that's really not the game. It's like we each face our own demons in life, and if you approach them head on and you don't like avoid, if you practice non-avoidance, there's wisdom to be had on the other end of it, for sure.
And I think that's the reality of it. You know, from the ages of 11 to 14, before I got sent away, the things that I was involved in, to be young and involved in those things, my only weapon was my ability to read people.
Yeah.
And my ability to say the right things at the right time. You know what I mean? And to psychological warfare. You know what I mean? That was my survival tactic when I was young, you know?
Yeah, this conversation, so it just, it brings up something for me, which is, and I talk about this a lot, and you see it in the fitness industry too, and people who are aware. But you can spend time with somebody, like I've spent time with you in the last 2 weeks, and learning just through our experience together. Every single person has a story behind them that has shaped who they are, and you get to experience where they're at in the present day. And if you have opportunities to dig into what that story is, like it can be so insightful into not only like deepening your relationship in the current moment, but just learning from what values that they bring. So, I'm learning from you in a lot of ways over the past 3-4 months. What I've learned about you and what I've learned from you in the last 2 weeks, now contextualize around this story that you have. The story doesn't necessarily define you. You are who you are today. In this moment, you have a choice to be, somebody I respect or somebody that's a piece of shit, however you want to say it. But as I start to hear, what's behind it, it adds a level of respect, understanding, and appreciation for everything that you show up to give. And that's, it's a crazy, very dramatic story, as most people will hear it.
Right.
But even when people don't have as big a dramatic story and they haven't dealt with drug addiction or gone to the desert or done the boarding school thing, like you can just dig in and it can level up the level, the respect and the relationship and deepen the connection that you have with people.
Right.
So I appreciate you sharing all of it. And, I was like, as I'm listening to this, I'm like, when the fuck does fitness show up? Because it's like, that's 2/3 of your life that you were destroying your body.
Yeah.
And now you've been doing it for a decade.
10 years. Yeah. 10 years. I mean, yeah, I'm telling you, man, out of 30 years of life, 20 of them were horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible. Like, I gave you a 10, 15 minute.
Yeah. And we're
now encapsulate the entire timeline of the 20 years.
Yeah,
and
cannot.
And the day by days events that were unfolding. You know what I mean? It was horrible, dude.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, why I'm able to be who I am for people, because as you said, right, I'm not in the business of comparing my trauma to other people. It's all relative, right? If whatever somebody has gone through is the worst that they know, even if to me it's like, man, I wish those were my problems.
Right.
For them, it could be perceived equally as bad, equally as traumatic as the degree of what I was going through. You know what I mean?
And then there's also the mindset of like, if you experience the worst of the worst of the worst, then it really puts into perspective other problems that you face in life. And so maybe there's some gratitude in that respect. It's like, oh, I've been through the sewer for my whole life, or for this large portion of my life, and now I'm gonna be upset that training is hard.
Right.
Like,
Well, and that is, when people are like, when I used to, when I was younger, from like 22 until maybe 27, I was doing my double days. I mean, I was doing every other day, but I was doing double days, doing 5 sets of everything. Yeah. I was in the gym for I would go to 5:30 in the morning. I'd be in there for 2.5 hours, 3 hours. Then I go back at 3 p.m., do another 2.5, 3 hours. And all my friends were like, dude, you're insane. You're genetically gifted. You're this, you're this. I'm like, bro, I'm just okay with suffering.
Sure. Yeah, so that's actually my next thing is I want to get into understanding a bit of the athlete journey that you took from 20 until, what even current day, how your past informed that.
Right.
What and just maybe let's just start there. Like, who are some of the role models or people that you learned from, and what do those early years of you getting into bodybuilding and powerlifting look like? Yeah,
so I mean, I'll be honest with you, like I said, I didn't care about fitness. You know what I mean? I never cared about it. I didn't I wasn't reading muscle magazines and I watching YouTube and idolizing anybody. I'm asthmatic. I'm severely asthmatic, so that's another thing is I spent the majority of my young childhood in hospitals because couldn't breathe, and so I didn't play sports because I was super uncomfortable. And like I said, I had a very anxious mom who would just be like, "Oh, it's okay. You had an asthma attack. You can't do this." You know what I mean? And so I was never pushed. Mm-hmm. I was never forced to do the sports. You know what I mean? Which is, once again, because I didn't have an outlet. This is why I found the street. You know what I mean? This is why I got comfortable being out in the street, because I didn't have anything. It's I just go hang out and do dumb shit. And so I didn't have any. I didn't understand what lifting weights was. I didn't understand. So, I look back on it, the first coach I ever had, even though I was like breaking records and shit like that in powerlifting, like he was a bad coach, dude. You know what I mean? But it's like, I didn't know. Like to me, he was the smartest guy in the world because I had nothing to compare it to, and then, I did powerlifting for a while. I stopped working with that coach, went to another coach, this coach, that coach, and then I took a nasty fall doing a 655 squat when I was near the end of being 21. Nasty fall, tore my ass, so I'd gone down. So the guy I had been training for a long time. I wanted to go for the national record in all lifts in the 198 category for juniors at the time. And I'd been training for, I don't know, 40-something weeks or 30, some ridiculously long time. It was 2 weeks before the competition. Squatting. The guy I was squatting with, he goes to my gym. We were going to be competing against each other. And we had a understanding that we do not let somebody get hurt during training. If it doesn't look like they're getting it, pick them up.
Yeah.
So I had gone for the squat. I got stuck in the middle position forever, and I was holding, and I'm like, this motherfucker's not scooping. So I drop down, and right as I drop down, he starts to try and pick me up, and I'm like, oh yeah, bro, you're gonna squat me and the 655 pounds? Like, move so I can dump the bar. He is not moving, so I can't dump the bar, so I lean forward. Well, we didn't have support beams on there. So the bar hits my head on the ground. I get knocked out. Slightly tears my rotator, pulls my shoulder back, slightly tears my rotator. So if anybody really sees, I have a little bit of an imbalance between my right and my left side because my pec is pulled forward on my right side. And I tear my ass. It rolled up. You could see the muscle roll up and it was lucky it was a muscle belly tear, but you could physically see it. And they, had to roll it down, wrap it up. And at the time, I was also going through a nasty breakup. So I ended up being out of the gym for a lot of months. Ended up, keep in mind, I was a heavier power lifter. I was, I'm 5'3" at the time. I wasn't that developed muscle wise, but I was competing in 198. So I was a pretty fat boy, which is fine for powerlifting. You want to have some weight on you. And then during that time, I ended up going up to I think it was 240, 250. I got really, really fat, really fat. And I wasn't training that much and whatever. And so, I finally decided, I was like, I want to get my weight in check. So this was maybe right as I turned 22, I was like, I got a bodybuilding coach. Worked with him for a while, learned about now the bodybuilding side of things, right? I had a very good understanding of the powerlifting side. And now I was going into the bodybuilding side. And he was the first guy where, we started hitting kind of a wall. Or not even a wall, just he started seeing my potential, I think.
Okay.
And he started pushing gear on me.
And for our listeners, because we're not the bodybuilding audience per se. What does that mean? Gear?
Steroids. Yeah. Okay. He started pushing performance enhancing drugs on me, talking about So what he was doing at first, he thought I had some 1 in a million genetics. So he was feeding me as if I was on steroids. I was eating 9-10 times a day. It was like I was waking up at 2 a.m. eating, and I was, I'm somebody who's at that point I was kind of submitting myself to the process and learning, and me being me, I give 100% to everything, which is why I was so good at doing bad things, because even though I was doing bad things, I wanted to be the best at doing the bad things. You know what I mean? Sure. And so in this case, I wanted to be the best at bodybuilding. So I took it seriously, and I was like, dude, wanting to throw up all day long for how much I was eating. And I was like, I wasn't losing weight. And I was like, dude, I think you're reaching by thinking that I'm like a mutant. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So he started trying to really push gear on me and push gear on me and push gear on me. And I was like, whatever, I'm not really feeling this anymore. Do you just not understand natural development? Is that why? Are you feeling nervous yourself that you don't know how to guide me without getting me on steroids? You know what I mean? So then this other guy sells me that he's a natural and he can coach me and all this stuff and give me better insight. So I go to this guy. So I leave this coach, I go to the other coach. Work with him for a few months. Then the steroid conversation comes up again. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, all right, what the fuck is going on, right? And keep in mind, like I said, I wasn't involved in the fitness growing up. I didn't pay attention to it. I didn't understand how prevalent steroids were. I didn't understand that if fucking everybody who's a high-performing athlete in the sport is doing some type of enhancement, you know what I mean? And so that's when so I went to another coach, another coach, another coach, another coach, another coach. Same thing over and over and over again. At some point, they would all sell me at first that they could help me get to my natural potential and shit, you know what I mean? And it would always go to, we should get you on gear.
What do you think that comes from, since it was so consistent among so many coaches? I mean, you've kind of postulated one, theory to me, but what is your take on why
money?
Money.
Why would anybody, especially, like, I'm very transparent about my life. Any of these coaches know that with my background with drugs, and that, fitness was finally giving me the value and the sense of value that I had in myself to actually stop doing drugs, because that's when I stopped. I was around mid-20s when I stopped doing drugs, because I fell in love with fitness, because for the first time in my life, I had found value in myself, you know what I mean? And I wanted to be alive now, and I made the correlation that all that drug abuse was just my passive way of trying to kill myself, because I wasn't happy. You know what I mean? I didn't think I deserved to be alive. I didn't want to be alive. I didn't find, there was no value. It was just like, I get the point of, oh no, you should stay alive because we love you and you have value. But it's like, okay, but I don't believe that. You know what I'm saying? So now I'm just existing to suffer. You know what I mean? So, I think it was my passive way of wanting to take myself out, because I just didn't have the balls to just go and do it, you know what I mean, or whatever. It was like I prayed, you know what I mean, that the drugs and the lifestyle would take me out, you know what I mean, and I wouldn't have to be accountable for it or whatever, And so, my biggest thing was, when I hear these guys trying to get me on drugs, I'm like, all I'm hearing is they're seeing a golden goose, and they want to make money off me, and in my opinion, okay, great. Sure, if they help me make a shit ton of money, they deserve some money. But here's another argument. I get on steroids, I get extremely sick, or something bad happens to me that puts me in a worse position physically and health-wise than I've ever been in my entire life. Reality is, they're going to throw me in the trash and go on with their lives. So either they make money off, either it goes well, and I make a bunch of money and they make a bunch of money and we're all happy, or it goes south, they throw me in the trash, go on with their lives, they still have their health, they still have everything, and I'm left in the gutter again, and I don't think I'd crawl out that time, you know what I'm saying, especially if I was handicapped to some capacity, And they weren't going to play me. I've been a hustler my whole life, you know what I mean, I could smell somebody trying to make a quick buck from a mile away, and so it was just kind of, whenever that conversation came up, I saw that their values didn't align with my values, that they didn't truly understand me, because if they did, they would understand that my desire to stay natural was far beyond my desire to be a bodybuilder.
And yeah.
It was about my health. It was about my integrity. It was about valuing myself, So
at some point you did find a coach that fit you.
Yeah, so when I moved down to Murrieta, where I'm currently living right now, I was training in LA Fitness, and I was bench pressing some crazy amount of weight. And this big, from the Strength Cartel, are you familiar with Strength Cartel?
Mm-hmm.
So Joe from the Strength Cartel, he walks up to me, big dude, and the first thing he says is, "Who are you?" And I was like, introduce myself. He goes, "You have no reason to be in this gym." And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about, And he goes, "You belong somewhere where you're in an environment around people who will push you to be better. You know what I mean? This is just some bullshit corporate gym, He's like, you should go check out Metroflex. They're just opening up off the freeway in Los Alamos. And I was like, all right. So I go there, the door's open. So I walk in. It was about 3 weeks before they had opened. So they weren't open yet. And the owner, Ryan, is there, as well as this older gentleman named Ray Anderson. And I walk in and I'm like, hey guys, like, can I train here? Oh, we're going to be open in 3 weeks, whatever. Start talking a little bit. And I start walking out. And then old man Ray, he stops me and he goes, hey, hold on 1 second. And he's like, let me talk to you. I go over to him. We start talking, just chit-chatting. He asked me about my history with lifting and whatever. And so I'm 23 at the time. Find out Ray is he's a chairman of the strength I forgot what it's called. He's part of the AAU, Amateur Athletic. Fucking AAU. It's a big. Yeah. But
We've heard of it.
Yeah. So he and he himself has like a tremendous amount of world records in strongman in the natural competitions, and super strong guy. Competed in natural bodybuilding for a long time, and from what I'm aware of till this day, that he remained natural his entire life and was a very high performing athlete. They ended up letting me train at Metroflex before they opened. Ray took me under his wing. He didn't charge me $1. And he invested his entire being into me for about a year. And I just hung out with him every single day. He just gave me everything I've always looked for in like a coach, you know. Unfortunately, he just passed away two months ago. And so, sorry, it's still fresh for me. He was to be honest with you, he was the first man in my life that was. Sorry, it's still fresh for me, dog.
It's all good.
Yeah, he randomly. Apparently, he had cancer for 10 years, but he just found out about it like 2 weeks before he died, and it spread through his spine and everything. He died within like a week and a half of being in the hospital. So, sorry. He kind of filled that hole in my heart of feeling like I didn't have that male role model. And I didn't need him to last forever, right? I didn't need him to wipe my ass for my entire life. That 1 year gave me enough of that fulfillment in that area to now let that part of my remorse in my life go, in terms of, you know, not having that figure. And now I was able to go and just be my own man, you know, because I no longer was feeling the burden of like, why did I never have that? And that desire to seek it, right? Like I would seek it from every male figure that I deemed as being in that position. And now I realized since I had it, now I can grow and be that person now, you know? And he was the first one to always tell me, you know, you're going to be an amazing coach one day. And I'd be like, fuck you, dude. Like, hell no. I'm never going to be a coach. Like, I'm a player. I'm on the field. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to be a coach. You know what I mean? And so he taught me everything. You know, he's the guy who instilled on me that there is no right way to do anything. That the only right thing to do is be consistent and fucking work hard.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the only way you're going to get there, you know, and be patient.
Amazing.
And so, he got me on stage for the first time in bodybuilding. I did 2 shows with him, and then I kind of looked at him, and, you know, there got to a point as well where I didn't feel like he was teaching me anymore, right? There was a cap on kind of even where he knew, right? And, that was about the point where this was 7 years ago now. And that was at the point where I realized I was like, I don't need a coach. I know I'm a brilliant person, and I'm very perceptive. I'm very, you know, I'm very intuitive. I'm going to know myself and what I need better than anybody's going to know, because I'm inside myself. You know what I mean? And that's when I started coaching myself, and I kind of took bits and pieces from every coach that I benefited from, you know what I mean? And I formulated my style of my power building every other day style of training, you know? Yeah. And that's what I've been doing for 8 years. And I mean, you see I'm a very big guy for a natural.
What's interesting about that is, and now we can dive into a bit of your training philosophies and what you've really developed in that pursuit over the last 7 years. But it's interesting, that was actually when you became a coach. It was like you were a player, you were doing bodybuilding, powerlifting, you were still in the game, and you now had to start really switching to thinking through the lens of a coach while you're being an athlete. Right. And it's like, I'm never going to be a coach. I'm going to be a player the whole time. But the moment you don't have someone guiding you, you end up becoming that for yourself, and you learn through that process. Right. And then that informs what you're going to do later on as you coach other people, because you're putting yourself through the struggles. You're putting yourself into every circumstance that all these clients in some form or another
you're right.
go up against. It's, I've hit a plateau. I'm feeling a pain. I'm not seeing the result that I want. I have to figure out how to manipulate what I'm doing around my lifestyle, around changes that are happening, around new relationships, around, a new job, a new career that's starting to, pop off, new social media. It's like, okay, all of these things everyone faces in some respect. And as a coach, it's like, I got to keep working hard and I got to keep doing it consistently. How do I change the plan so I can keep doing that while life is evolving, while my chronological age is, going up, and all the things that come with that. And so it's like, you started that at 23, 24 years old. You were like suddenly having to answer those questions for yourself
on a daily basis.
Yeah. And then as you answer them for yourself, you see other people running into obstacles. You're like, I know what you're doing wrong. I see what you're doing wrong. Oh, that's an interesting situation. How would I do that? And like, it's just in your head. And then eventually the day comes where somebody says like, hey, I want to pay you to do this for me. And you're like, oh, this is, I've been doing this for the last however many years. Yeah, I can figure this out with you.
Sure.
And that ramps up the speed of your evolution as a thinking, fitness coach. Right.
And I think that's where my philosophy and my frustration almost with like how, the new science-based era is, where it's so black and white. It's like, dude, coaching yourself for 7 to 8 years, you learn better than anybody else that every day looks different.
Yeah, it's a lot of gray. It's just gray all the time.
Every day looks different.
Yeah.
To be so black and white about what is wrong, what is right is insane.
Yeah, totally.
If I would have just been like super robotic about everything, I would have never gotten to where I would have given up. You know what I mean? I would have not gotten to where I got to, maybe hopped on gear because I didn't see the results. It was my ability to bend and weave and flow with the wind, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That allowed me to continue to progress, because it became we need to be perceptive about what we're experiencing today and what's the best way to execute today and stay on track regardless of what's going on,
Yeah. Okay. Well, these are more of the interesting conversation points to me. I thought maybe we would talk specifically about your training methodologies, but honestly, if anybody wants to know more about your training methodologies, just go follow you on social media, join your newsletter, you'll learn all about it. There's some really unique stuff in there, but as we know, there's no one perfect way to do anything. So, you can learn a lot and apply it to your life. But what I'm curious about more is with the last 10 years that you've gotten into fitness. I started fitness 25 years ago. So I started hitting the gym when I was 15. I'm 40 now. I did the Muscle magazine. I did the bodybuilding.com. I was on T Nation for years in the early days. There was no YouTube. There was no social media. There was nothing. You came up in the fitness world when social media was already kind of going. I mean, Instagram was a thing. YouTube was getting bigger. There's been YouTubers going on. I'm really curious to know, like, today, having experienced this in your timeline of fitness, what are those like things that just irk you about the fitness community? Not just as like a coach who knows a lot, but like, I see this and it's confusing the hell out of the everyday person who's trying to use fitness to just better their life.
Right.
What are some of those areas that really, really get you? I
mean, my biggest thing, man, is like people out there are minimizing the importance. And I know that this isn't, and even me saying, about to say this right now, I know this isn't a hot take, or it is. I guess, I don't know if a hot take is a bad thing, but it's not what people want to hear. The people who are successful in this sport are not the ones who are following a push-pull-legs program or an every other day program or doing this or doing that. It's the people who are willing to shut the fuck up and work for years and give up everything for their goal. I'm talking about for 7, 8 years, man. I'm waking up 3 a.m., putting my headphones in, eating my meals, no women, no partying, no drinking, no friends, nothing. Gym, eating, sleep, study. That's it. Day after day after day after day. And when I go to the gym, I'm not, per the paper, I stimulated my fibers properly. No, I'm not walking out of there until I can't move my arms. I can't move my legs. Is it the best way to train? I don't know. Yeah. If I would have done anything else, I might not be who I am today in this space. I might not look who I am. I might not be performing the way that I am.
Yeah.
All that I know is, and I've had clients where guess who the ones that were the best clients and the most successful clients? The ones who were willing to shut the fuck up and work their ass off.
Yeah. I call it like, it's like a culture of box checking. And there's a huge amount of social media coaches, influencers that like to propose that if we just check these boxes of exercise selection, proper technique, talking about RIR, RPE as like this thing that we can actually, measure with some level of accuracy, which most people cannot. It's like if you check these boxes, you're good. Check your protein box, check this box, check that box. And to a certain degree, having structure like that is really powerful for people, because if they're coming from, I know nothing, it's like, well, here's a set of things that will help you move in the right direction. But above all of that is not just like check boxes, but it's bringing a level of intensity or bringing a level of like focus and grit and determination that every single person that you admire, whether it be in sport, business, or some other aspect of life that you really think is special, if they've achieved a level of success that you would put on the level of greatness that you aspire to be like, they have gone through really hard times and chapters that you never have seen that look dirty and gross and just working like till they're exhausted. And that has to be first, before you start layering on all these box checking things. Because if you know how to work hard, if you know how to really push yourself, then I can add structure in by saying, hey, this might be more optimal than that. This might be more optimal than that.
Let's nurture that intensity that you already innately have for yourself,
And you see that a lot. It's like when I know early on my coaches that were helping me in CrossFit, they would say like, they want an athlete that has like, I think they termed it as like low perception. Just like the athlete that just shows up and just like, just tell me what to do. Not like, well, I'm not, this is this, and I'm not feeling this. And it's like, okay, that's a category of athlete that's probably not going to be great. They could be good. But the person who just shows up is like, what do I do, coach? Okay, you want me to go die right now? Okay, I'll go do that. All right. Oh, you want me to go die on this? I'll go do that. Like just, and if you start there, find that drive, that intensity, that focus, where you're willing to just push your limits, then you can layer on a lot of the...
Well, I agree. So for me, for instance, I was always like that as well. When I would hire somebody to coach me, I am paying them to control what the hell I'm doing. I'm not going to argue it. I might ask questions, like clarifying questions, but I'm not going to argue it. You want me to go do this? I'm going to go do this exactly how you told me to. But I'm also going to think about why I'm doing it. I'm also going to take a second and understand why I'm doing it and pay attention to if it is benefiting me or not. I'm not just going to be like, this person is my oxygen tank. You know what I mean? And without him, I can't breathe on my own. No. They're just, I'm breathing. I'm my oxygen tank. They just have a guiding line on me. You know what I mean? And that's what allowed me to absorb the information, because I wasn't just doing what they were telling me. I was understanding why they were telling. I was doing it so I can see for myself the benefits of it. Right? When somebody hires me and I ask them to do every other day, and they're like, oh, well, I really like training 6 days a week. First thing I say is, well, you've been training 6 days a week. And you're not getting the goals you want, which is why you're reaching out to hire a coach. So what's the number one thing we should do first? Change what you've been doing and see if there's another option for you out there. If it doesn't work better for you, we'll throw it in the trash. But you will not know what you need to improve on if you do not change what you have already been doing that is not giving you the results that you want. And so what I think, when it comes to my biggest ick, right, is that when you talk about check boxes and we think about why does that culture exist right now? Well, here's the reality. 99.99999% of the world will never beat what's considered an elite level athlete in the sport of, let's just simplify it, bodybuilding. Never will happen. Genetics, work ethic, care, right? Some people just simply don't want to be the biggest dude in the world. They just want to look good and live a nice balanced life. So then it becomes, well, if 99.999% of the market doesn't want to become elite or will not become elite, then as a business owner, do I pander to the 0.00001%? Or do I pander to the 99.9999%? Mm-hmm. Well, as a business owner yourself, me being a business owner, me being the smart move would be to pander to the 99.999%. That's where the money's at. Mm-hmm. So now it becomes, it doesn't matter what you tell them because they're going to stay average anyways, right? All we need to do is get them in the gym. All we need to do is get them on a structured program. All we need to do is get them checking boxes, because checking boxes enough will have them healthy, looking good, feeling happy, and feeling as though they are making strides. Mm-hmm. So now it becomes, we don't have to actually sell the truth behind what it takes to become elite. Mm-hmm. We just have to make it sound like our definitives are the best sounding definitives.
Yeah, there you go.
So we back them by science, we back them by research, right? It's like any supplement out there you want to sell. What do? If I just went and made a supplement, was like, hey, this is my supplement, I think it's really good, buy it. Then the next guy's like, hey, here's my supplement. I have 16 pages of literature. We've tested it. We've shown how bioavailable it is and how much the body actually metabolizes it and all this stuff. It could be the same supplement. Which one are you going to buy?
Right.
The one that's backed by science. So now I could tell you that, it doesn't matter as long as you're pushing yourself. Movement choice doesn't really matter as long as you're patient. You spend years doing the same thing. You eat your meals, you get good sleep, you dedicate yourself, you bring intensity, all this, that's going to give you the best results. Or somebody's like, do this very specific movement at this angle, this many times a week for this many reps exactly, and you will get the most optimal results. Well, for somebody who's not going to be elite anyways and won't be able to tell the difference between my method and their method, which one are you going to buy? Mm-hmm. The one that eliminates as many variables as possible, as much anxiety as possible, as much unknowns as possible. So then what you have now is a culture of people who are willingly pandering to people who know will never find the flaws in what's being said because they'll never take it to that level.
Yeah, I mean, it is and now we're talking like fitness industry, business, and coaching, and optimal methods, all in the same conversation. Because as somebody who's also running a fitness business, and I want to impact the most people possible, so there's, how do I get somebody in the door? How do I then provide them enough structure that they see and feel those early wins? And then how do I over time teach them, hey, this is what really matters. This is where you want to focus your energy. And it's interesting because, and I'm sure you've seen these memes, but it's like this bell curve where it's like on the low end of the bell curve where you're just getting started, it's like just 3 sets of 10, work your ass off. And then the middle of the bell curve is as you start to learn more, you start to get flooded with all this information, you're kind of in that middle zone where a lot of people sit, where it's like, got to do the right science-based exercise, got to do this, got to check this box. And just like, there's so much input and you're trying to optimize everything. And then as you evolve even further, you come back down the back slope of that bell curve and you're like, 3 sets of 10, work your ass off, and it's like the middle is where a lot of people are sitting. Right. And that is what the fitness industry is all kind of like looking to try and gain market share of. How do I speak to this big population? And I play the game. I'm not going to lie. Like we do as a company, how do I get that group of people to listen so that I can ultimately evolve them to understand what really matters? And it's not just 3 sets of 10, but it's like, I fight the battle of like people who are hearing that fasting is good for autophagy, and you got to eat no seed oils, and you got to do this and that, and like all of these biohackers that are out there. And I just want to grab a hold of them and then eventually move them to the point where it's like, hey, get your steps in, lift hard 3 to 4 days a week, you know, eat enough protein, keep your calories in check, and I promise you'll get all the results that you want just from that. And you don't have to worry about sauna and red light and cold exposure and you know, maniacally looking through every label to make sure you
to help the montage go faster, right? It's like we have this montage idea of, you know, oh, I'm going to get lean. It's going to take you 6 months. But in your head at the beginning, you know, you have the little montage like, oh, you can kind of see the process unfolding or whatever. But then you realize that you got 6 months of 24-hour long days to get through, and doing the saunas, doing the cold plunge, doing this, doing that. It just makes you feel like you're somehow expediting the process.
Right.
When in reality, it's like you could eliminate all those factors and it would happen the exact same way, just doing those fundamental things that you're saying. You know what I mean?
And I've also learned that the role of a coach is not to tell you these are the 10 extra things that are going to expedite the process. The role of the coach is to understand that it takes 6 months or 12 months or however long, like have the big vision, be there with you so that when you run into the longest 24-hour stretch of the whole process where you're ready to just say, screw it, this sucks, they just say, hey, you're doing it. We're on the path. This is how you're supposed to feel. This is all part of the process. You're okay. Show up tomorrow. Go to bed, get a good night's sleep, wake up tomorrow, check in with me. We keep going. And you know, it's like I have a little saying. I have one client who checks in with me and he hits me up with this thing. And it's like, my weight went up by a pound or my weight went down or whatever. And I'm always just the same thing. I'm like, cool, more of the same. You know, today's another day. Stick to the plan. And that can be the most powerful thing that a coach can do. Probably more so than, hey, I found the right exercise to unlock the, you know.
Keep it exciting. Keep them manipulated, right? Yeah, I get it. I get it.
And you know what? It's like keeping things fresh and exciting is sometimes the tool that you got to play to keep people playing the game and in the game.
I mean, that's what I'm pretty sure I told this to you as well when we took we did our intake call together, you know, is that like, I'm not somebody who's going to, you know, change anything that I don't think I need to change just to keep you on board. My goal as an educator, right, and not even as a coach, just simply as an educator, is that if in 2 or 3 months somebody hits me up and they're like, hey man, like I really appreciate everything you've taught me, kind of feel like you've shown me and given me all your philosophies and given me everything that you understand, and I understand it now, and I feel like there's really no reason for me to pay you anymore. Like I feel like I can go take it and do it on my own now. I'm not going to stop that person. That's a win for me. I just gave this person a tool. I'm no longer a crutch for them. You know, a coach is always a crutch in the beginning. But I've turned now what myself as being a crutch into a tool that they now have, that they feel confident enough that they can go and do. I mean, if they want to, like, you know, you continue to work with me, and I love that because, you know, as you develop and as you get closer and closer, your goals, because, you know, in truth is to see the benefit of a program takes some time. You know what I mean? Sure. It takes some time. So it's like, you know, I'd prefer somebody to stay with me for long term, because once they, you know, have been doing it for enough months and things start really, really changing, like, of course there's going to have to be some adaptation or some adjustments that need to be made, you know? But in the end of the day, if somebody feels like they can go and take that in their own hands because I've imparted enough wisdom onto them and they've really like absorbed it, that's a win for me.
And I'm sure that was probably it was Ray, right? Your former coach. It's like at the end of a year, I'm going to go off and coach myself.
That's my point. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure he saw you in your physical development over the next 6-7 years, and he's so proud. It's like, oh, I gave him something, a foundation to go and build off of, and look what he's done with it. I just had a client that I messaged with this morning, and, you know, he just popped into my head. He stopped working with me 6 months ago. We did 6 months, and, you know, he put on a bunch of muscle and was proud, and then he stopped. And part of me was like, oh, damn, we just got started. Like, we got more, but all right, yeah, you go do your thing. And he checked in with me and just sent me some progress photos as of today. And he's like, I've been maintaining it. I built a little bit more muscle. Like, he's still crushing it. And I'm just like, great.
That's what you want. Like, you know, like, money's nice, dude. We all need it. We all need money. But at the end of the day, it's like, there has to be that line. There has to, when I talk about integrity and accountability, right? There has to be that recognition that like, okay, great. Like you make good money. You have a successful business, not because you're ripping people off, not because you're making it exciting and lying to people. You know what I mean? It's because you're bringing genuine value to people. You know what I mean? You're genuinely helping people and providing people with tools. And so more people want that service from you. You know, you genuinely care to be a good coach. And that's the way I look at it, where it's like people are unable out there to separate themselves from what is a good coach, what is somebody who genuinely cares about helping people develop and move forward and be able to have that self-value and self-accountability and confidence in what they're doing, and how many people just want to keep somebody on a payroll. You know what I mean? And I think that's where, you know, even like the system I'm developing, I'm going to have 6-day programs on there. I'm going to have 5-day programs. I'm going to have programs that if I was working with one-on-one with somebody, I would probably not recommend. Not because I'm trying to rip people off, but because I also understand that there's some people out there who don't want to be bodybuilders. They simply want to be in the gym 6 days a week. They want to just, they want to be constructive. Right? They don't want to be destructive. They want to be constructive. I know how to program 5 days. I know how to program 6 days. I know how to program all these types of programs because I've done them myself. And I understand the science behind everything. And I understand, you know, the process and the right way to do things. So even if it isn't in my opinion, the best way to do things and the most constructive way to do things, I'm happy to create programs for people who, I love Coach Z. I love his variations. I love his movement choices. I like training 6 days a week because, you know, mental health or just stress or, you know, I just move my body. I'm a family man. I own a business. You know, I like moving my body an hour a day, and I want to get my information from him. I want to be able to provide the people what they want. You know what I mean? In that end.
And from your perspective, it's like, and I recognize that if you were to ask me what is the best way, you know, the straightest, fastest line to elite, you know, levels of athletics, strength, bodybuilding, you would say, well, it's this path. But here are some other paths that you can take, because I recognize that 99.9% of you don't want to be elite, and that this serves a different purpose for you.
It keeps you healthy.
Yes.
In the end of the day, if I can provide you a 6-day program that is going to have you moving your body 6 days a week and feeling healthy, and that's all you want because you want to be healthy for your business, for your family, for your kids, for yourself, and that's all you care about. That's the extent that it goes. I'm happy to provide that. But if you ask me what is the most optimal way from a muscle development standpoint,
it's this.
It's this. This is my opinion. You know, this is my professional opinion. It's not, you know, so I think that's where the lines are being blurred, is that there's people out there who are trying to sell to the masses the most optimal way to grow their muscles without actually having that understanding, because they're so consumed with, like I said, trying to sell the best product to the people that they know won't ever actually be elite. And that's where it gets icky for me, because
and it's something that, like, Alex Ramosi, who I've learned a ton from in business. He's also got a big background in fitness, and he always says, he's like, you think you're, as a coach or a gym owner or whatever, you think you're coaching, you think your business is fitness, but you're actually a marketing company. It's just marketing. It's marketing and sales. How do you get somebody to basically do the same thing we all know to do? You got to move, you got to lift weights, you got to eat a little less, you got to control your diet. And like you said, it's to market and sell something. The path that social media and the trends in fitness have taken is, well, let's get more nuance, let's get more scientific, let's really package something in a way that seems exceptionally professional and, you know, high level thinking, and that will attract an audience. And it's, you know, it's gotten a little bit messy. And so, which kind of leads me to sort of the next question or topic. I don't know when it was, maybe a year ago. You didn't have a social media following. Now you've got several hundreds of thousands of people that are paying attention to you. You were resistant to getting into the social media game. Now that you're in it, you're part of it, you have a responsibility. What do you see as that responsibility as you're educating on the platforms like TikTok, so, you know, Instagram, YouTube?
So, I mean, to be honest with you, like I said, like, I didn't grow up reading muscle magazines or watching YouTubes and whatever like that. I didn't know who the Jeff Nippards were, or the TNFs, or like any of these science-based. I actually, until last year when I started posting, I didn't even know a science-based, like there was a science-based industry in the fitness space. You know what I mean? Like I just assumed, like I knew there was science behind it, of course. Like, you know what I mean? I went to UCLA. I've taken physiology classes. I've understand that there is a field of exercise science that exists. I'm not like that, you know what I mean, out of the world. But like I didn't understand. I didn't know that these like science-based influencer guys. I didn't even know like Athlete X was or anybody. Like, you know what I mean? Like I just didn't care because in my opinion, like I was looking at people who had accomplished the goals that I wanted to accomplish for myself for guidance, you know, like when I like, and not even then, it's like I said, I was coaching myself, but it's like, yeah.
Bro, you weren't following me on social media? Come on now.
To be honest, I didn't even know who you were.
Yeah, I hit him up. He's like, who's this guy?
Yeah, you know what I mean? But like, I just don't like, I'm just focused on what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Like there's so little hours in the day to be hyper fixated on what it's like when people ask me, do I watch sports? And I'm like, with all due respect, I'm poor. Why the fuck am I going to spend 6 hours of my life watching somebody else be filthy rich playing with a basketball? I have shit to do. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like, that's the way I looked at fitness as well. It's like, yeah, I knew who Franco Columbo was. I know who Arnold was. I know who Roddy Coleman and Jay Cutler. Like, I know who these guys are. You know what I mean? But it's like, I'm not going to sit there and spend hours of my day like, oh, you know what I mean? When it's like, bro, I am poor and not successful yet, not a professional bodybuilder yet, and not a world-class powerlifter yet, not like I haven't met any of my goals in life yet. Why the fuck am I going to spend hours of my life just Google goggling, you know, idolizing somebody else, you know? And so, but I would see every now and then on Instagram, I'd see these guys, you know, these littler guys, smaller guys, like going into these extremely detailed nuances about the right way to lift, you know? And it was insufferable for me to watch. I hated it, dude. Like it made my stomach churn of like, dude, like, I made an example with somebody the other day where I said, if you buy a box of brownie mix and you follow the recipes on the box of brownie mix, every single time you will get brownies. If I follow the directions of these guys in their most optimal, definitive, undeniable, best way to train, guess what? You don't always get brownies. So obviously there's more to it. Obviously it's not so black and white. You know what I mean? Obviously it's like, it's not that definitive, you know? And so I just didn't want to be one of those guys. Everybody in my community was like, you have to get on social media, dude. Like you bring so much value to all of us, you know, like for years, you get on social, start posting. And it's like, I'd post, but it'd be like little funny skits or just like, you know, or like, you know, just lifting weights, or it wasn't anything more than that, because it was just like, I didn't want to be one of those guys because I didn't like those guys. I didn't like resonate with them. I didn't like how definitive and how much they were trying to sell people that their way is the right way, because I was so aware that it is very ambiguous. You know what I'm saying? It is very personalized. That is why they call it personalized nutrition, because everybody's process is going to be unique to their experience, their reality, their body, their genetics. So to make such definitives and to be so arrogant about it, it was just like, this has no place in fitness. It's a marketing scheme. You know, and I was very, like I said, I've been a hustler my whole life, bro. I've learned how to smell bullshit before I step in it. You know what I mean? And so I didn't want to do it. I just didn't want to do it. And, you know, so we started, but then I started, you know, doing my cameraman at the time, a little over a year ago. He just kind of was like, dude, you have to, like, we were shooting fitness content, like, you know, just my body, just training. It wasn't, you know, little quips here and there, little remarks, but it wasn't anything super in depth, you know. I was at the gym one day and I was explaining to my buddy a superset for a chest movement. And my cameraman goes, stop what you're doing. He put the camera, he goes, now do exactly what you're doing in front of the camera. So I did. And the video got like 200,000 views. So I thought,
I can do that.
Maybe people want to hear what I have to say, you know? And I told everybody around me, I said, I will do this But the second that I have to start playing in the circus and not acting like myself and pretending that I'm somebody else and that I do other things just to fit in, not doing it, not making the little meme videos, not like, you know what I mean? I'm going to get in front of the camera, give my information, give my opinion. That's it. Raw, uncut Ziad. They like me, they like me. They hate me, they hate me. They don't like me, it doesn't happen. I'm going to walk away. I'm going to do something else.
Nice.
You know what I mean? And so, God bless, people resonated with who I am, you know? And as now meeting me, you know, the conversation we had over text, when the first day I came here, you're like, hey, you know, there's no reason, you know, I hope you know that I invite you to like be coaching so much while you're here. I wanted you to just come work out. Yeah. And I said, it's just who I am, dog. Yeah. Like who you're seeing on the videos.
Yes.
Is existing on those videos.
Right.
Because that's just who I am. Like you ask me a question, you're going to regret ever asking me a fucking question because I'm going to hold you hostage for the next 30 minutes and give you the whole, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, you're going to be sitting there like, God, I just asked this motherfucker, should I grip underhand?
Bro,
you know
we got to get this workout.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
You know, something that you're very outspoken about is natural development in bodybuilding and sport, that's been your journey. And, you know, it's somebody who actually, and I'll just share this, like coming up in athletics, in sports, I was either very just naive or really wasn't exposed to a lot of steroid use. And as a matter of fact, it wasn't until really the last few years where like a lot of people have been talking about the use of steroids and TRT that I even really became aware of just how prevalent I think it is. Now I see you and you're one of the biggest humans I've had the chance to like get to know and train around and see levels of strength that are crazy to me. And I think as like an average, you know, viewer, I would just be like, well, this guy's of course got to be on steroids. Right. Like there's no way. Like how can you be this big, have this much muscle, you know, be able to lift weights that I can't even dream of picking out of the rack. What do you say to somebody who's like, look, I can't fathom you being a natural athlete. How does that actually, you know, obviously you've talked about your drug history and how does that fit in with like who you are and your value system? And then, you know, what's your commitment to like talking about that and sharing it, you know, through your platform and helping maybe people recognize that there's a different way of going about development.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, I don't expect anybody to ever believe that I'm natural. But the biggest thing is that it's not, that doesn't matter to me because they're looking at it from two different places. They're looking at it with a hyper obsession and a hyper fixation on bodybuilding. They're not looking at the fact that my reason for staying natural is due to a lifelong process to remove myself from the shit I grew up in, right? You look at it like this. Everybody does what they do in their life based on desperation for what they want, correct? Why do we make money? Desperation to pay bills, have food. For some people, we make more money because we have a desperation to be perceived a certain way and have certain things, right? Have a certain quality of people around us, have a certain quality of lifestyle. Right? Why does somebody go and study 20 years to become an astronaut? Because they have a desperation to go be in space, right? Desperation is the guiding light in everything we do, right? When somebody goes to prison, right? You see all the times in court. Why did you commit this act of crime? Desperation. Desperation is our one and only motivator. Whatever we really, really want for ourselves, that's what we want. Me, on my end, it was my desperation to have a different quality of life that has driven me to get to where I am today, right? I would have never crawled out that gutter. All my friends that I grew up with, they didn't. Some are doing fine, but some of the people that I was really in the shit with, and I get to see that, and I get to see that this is what I should have been if I didn't have that desperation to make a change. So when it comes to natural, somebody claiming natural, reality is you'll never know. Infinitely many ways to get away with it. You just will never know. You know, somebody, especially somebody who really is well connected, understands the sport, has a good coach, who knows the science and everything like that, they'll never get caught. There's so many like natty plus supplements now, you know, peptides and SARMs and all this shit that like they don't really test for, right? It's like you will never know if somebody's been natural for their entire life or not, right? Because somebody could have also been on gear for 5 years, 15 years ago. You'll never know. So if I can never know through actual tests, what's my best way of knowing? Well, let's look at the person. Let's look at their desperation. Let's look at their why, right? You look at somebody like me, my desperation lies in, I want to be as healthy, as strong, as big, and as drug-free as I possibly can in regards to, you know, synthetic drugs. You know, I do dabble with marijuana. I grow it. If I can grow it from a seed, I'm fine to consume it. You know what I mean? But it's for me, you know, I don't drink. I don't do anything that's manufactured, you know? I don't even take fucking Advil, dude. You know, I don't like it. And so, you know, my desperation lies in helping people find that same value in themselves that I found in myself. That's my desperation. I don't give a fuck about bodybuilding. All the competitions I've done, every time I got on stage, the first thought in my head is, why the fuck am I here again? You know, and I did it because I wanted to learn the process, right? I wanted to learn how to do it. I want to learn, but I don't care about the sport of bodybuilding. I don't know who 95% of the bodybuilders in the world are. I don't care. I don't follow them. Go to my following list. You know what I mean? I follow a few of them, but literally we follow each other because there's like a mutual knowing. It's not because I'm like fanboying, you know what I mean? It's like I literally know this person. We follow each other. It's not like, you know what I mean? Like I don't follow any bodybuilders who I don't know myself because I just don't care about the sport like that, you know? And so, you know, when you look at it, it's like, okay, well, if that's my desperation, then maybe it makes sense that he's not on steroids. Because the goal isn't, steroids don't support the desperation. Steroids don't support the goal. But then you look at somebody who claims natural, and their whole page is glorifying bodybuilding. They're like a newscaster for bodybuilding. Like they're, you know, you just know that this person just fucking loves bodybuilding so much, and their desperation lies in existing in that industry and existing in that sport. Well, if that's where their desperation lies, you don't think they'd ever make a little white lie to weasel their way in there? Let me ask you something. In your entire life, have you ever wanted to be with a girl so badly that you told a little white lie that you would never ever tell anybody that you told? You know what I mean? You fibbed a little bit. You know what I mean? Of course, everybody has, right? Everybody's lied at a job interview, or you know what I'm saying? And they're never going to admit it, right? They'll never go and be like, hey, I lied to you about this, by the way. No. Desperation is the leading cause of the leading driver to everything that we do. And so, you know, like I said, when you look at somebody who's super desperate for clout, super desperate to be acknowledged in the fitness space, super desperate and super hyper obsessed with all things bodybuilding and whatever, you're going to tell me that person has never dabbled in their entire life? I'm going to call bullshit. For some, what it sounds like to me is that they might have dabbled and had some, you know, didn't like it or just were honest with themselves and saw that they wouldn't have been top class, and they stepped away and they were like, okay, well, if I'm not ever going to be a champion, I need to find another way to exist in this sport.
Yeah.
Because I still want to be involved in it because I'm desperate to be involved in it.
Yeah.
So now if you can't be involved in the sport the organic way by being a champion, by being a pioneer in the sport, what's the next best way to do it? Weasel and manipulate your way in there.
Yeah. Wow.
You
well,
know?
that's a really interesting way of just not just like looking at the steroid conversation, but just understanding human motivation and what drives people. And, you know, that is, to tie it back to fitness business, what we're trying to do with individuals is like understand what is your desperation, and then draw a connection to working hard, lifting weights, eating right, and say, hey, well, this is what you really want. This is a path to that. So it's like this person's motivated by, you know, career advancement and money. It's like, hey, you want to be a better CEO, or you want to be a better professional, like you want to have more efficiency, you want to show up better at interviews, like this gets you in shape, right? Or this person's like, hey, I'm just dying for the affection of, a partner. Like I want to be more presentable, have more confidence in front of, okay, then you lean into that, and all roads lead back to eating right, training hard. It's like, and you can find that in a lot of different, approaches to trying to get people to do what we've discussed, which is like, hey, this is going to be, a couple decades of you just doing a lot of the same stuff and working hard. And as long as we can connect it at different stages of life to what your true core desperation is, what you truly are there for, why you exist, then you can find that consistency, because it's the idea that you're going to be motivated and inspired to do this stuff over and over and over and over and over again is just cuckoo.
Right. Well, the constructive term to use is intention, right? I use desperation around the conversation of fake natties and being able to tell what a natural is, because it's icky. And so the word desperation fits the tone a little more. But what you're describing, of course, it is still desperation.
Yeah.
But intention is a more constructive word,
That's
right? We want to
yeah.
help people find their intention. You know what I mean? Because that is the core of everything. Like you said, if you're going to do something for 20 years, the only thing that's going to keep you disciplined, right, and on track is understanding the intention. You lose sight of the intention, at some point you're going to be like, I have a client right now who reached out, and she was like, I don't know why I keep self-sabotaging. Like I feel like I don't deserve these goals. And I said, well, hey, there's a reason why only a small percent of people actually accomplish these goals. It's because whether you accomplish those goals or not, you're gonna end up in the ground anyways. So you don't actually have to do this.
Yeah.
And there's comfort in that. There's comfort in knowing that whether you follow through with your goals or whether you fail and go eat those cookies, you're gonna end up in the same place anyway. So who gives a fuck?
Yeah, well.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's comfort in that. There's comfort in knowing that we can fail over and over and over and over again, and the outcome will be exactly the same as if we did everything right and held ourselves accountable. And you know what I mean? Like, there is no different end consequence. We die.
Yeah.
That being said, one thing is guaranteed, that if you always succumb to that shit, you will never leave an everlasting impression on the world that can exist for lifetimes after you die.
Yeah. Wow.
Now, is that your intention? Do you give a shit about that? Well, if not, I guarantee you're going to be much more likely to eat that cookie, because it doesn't go beyond yourself.
Yeah.
The goal doesn't go beyond yourself. The intent doesn't go beyond yourself. Therefore, if we're going to die anyways, and I don't really care about my legacy living on anymore, fuck it, I'm going to eat this cookie right now.
Yeah, we're going to go to Crumble.
Right. I'm going to go to...
Well, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate you going in all the different depths of your story and speaking to kind of where things are at today for you. Take a minute to just let the audience know what you got going on as a coach in your businesses, whatever you'd like to share. This is your chance. Yeah.
So, as we know, my social media has blown up very quickly, and there's been a very high demand for coaching from me. That being said, if I have 1,000 people in a month reach out to me for coaching, with all due respect, I have to take the clients in who are willing to pay the money that I'm asking for, not because I want more money, but because to me, it's showing that this person is willing to do what they need to do to make that investment and respect my time and give themselves fully to the process, whether they can afford it or not, which I've been there as well. You know what I mean? Than somebody who can only afford, I have some clients I train for free. I took them in early on, and I still coach them now. You know what I mean? But somebody who's calling me, who has the money to pay me what my rates are, but is saying, hey, can I do it for $400 less? It's like, well, let me ask you something. There's somebody else who's willing to pay me full price because they're that invested. They're willing to make that much of a commitment. They're willing to respect my time like that. Why would I choose the person who wants to already start the process trying to cheat and take shortcuts than the person who's willing to, this is what they want. They're reaching out to me because they want my process. This is what I'm deeming the process is worth. You know what I mean? And they're willing to go into it 100%. Why would I tell no to that person and yes to the person already trying to take a shortcut, Now, I understand some people physically can't pay for it, right? I get it. But that being said, I'm one person. I can't take on 1,000 clients a month for $5 a month. as a coach yourself, you know it would be physically
no
impossible for me.
And no one's going to get a good product.
No one's going to get a good product, right? So I've put in a lot of money. I put in a lot of time developing a system where I will now be able to provide coaching for everyone. They'll get their personalized meal plans, personalized workouts, instructional videos, a community center for other people to talk to each other and, you know, build a community with each other. There would be like a point system, you know what I mean? Like that'll reward people for
showing
up and doing what they need to do. It's going to be super, super affordable. I think everybody on planet Earth would be able to afford it. You know, it's going to be everything that they would receive coaching from me for a very cheap price. And I think it'll be available for everybody to be able to use. So that's going to come out in roughly June.
Awesome.
So I'm super, super excited for that.
Yeah. And so where, aside from social media, how can people keep up with what you're doing?
Yeah. So if anybody goes to my Instagram or Facebook and clicks the Hubi link, it says Hubi. You click that, there is the top box on that website is a email list. And if you sign up for the email list, I will be sending out newsletters, multiple newsletters a week. We actually have our first one coming out in 2 days, and it's really fun. This is going to come out already, so it's going to be whatever, but it's going to be about how should you change your training when you go on a cut, and the answer is you don't. You keep the expenditure the same and you just adjust the calories because you understand that your maintenance is dependent on what your current expenditure is.
Yeah.
And therefore, if you know what your maintenance is based on your current expenditure,
don't change what you're doing.
Don't change what you're doing because then you're going to create too deep of a deficit. And so Jake actually coded a mini game where basically you have 5 options on eating and expenditure, and you have like high expenditure, slightly higher than normal expenditure, slightly lower than normal, and then super low, and then same with the calories. And the only way to win the mini game is to keep expenditure the same and keep calories slightly below maintenance. That's the only way to win. If you pick any other combination, it'll let you continue, but then at the end it'll be like, oops, like he didn't get lean enough for the show, you know what I mean?
Fun.
So just to help people understand, you know, visually, cool. Like you can't win the game unless you know, so I'm going to have a lot of newsletters on there. So sign up for the email list. It's in the link to my bio at Ziad.Mansour. I don't know if you can like put that on the
show notes.
On the screen. Yeah. And then I'll also be doing like private seminars and stuff like that for people on that email list. And then on that email list, if you are on it, 10 people from that email list will receive free lifetime coaching with my new coaching system. 100 others will get it for 50% off. Not to mention I'll be doing a bunch of other giveaways, and you will be the first to know. I am going to be releasing the system to the email list first. So if you want to get that discount.
It's been a pleasure, man. Yeah. 2 weeks of getting to know you, getting to know Igloo, and hopefully it's just the first of many visits to come.
Yeah. No, definitely, dude. I'm looking forward to continuing to build and shoot more. I mean, it's been a very nice opportunity for me to come and, you know, just be here, man, and step away from my loop that I'm living in all the time. You know what I mean?
Well,
so
we got a lot out of it too. So
awesome.
Glad you were here.
Cool,
Thanks
brother.
for joining us.
Yeah.
Bye. All right, y'all. Catch you on the next one.